D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, David Janes here with you today. Gentlemen, yesterday, I dropped off my wife and son at the airport. They're going to visit my wife's parents.
Party over Adams.
Well,
let's do it.
You say that.
Bachelor.
We talked about this the last time they went out of town. You thought I would be like Tom Cruise in Risky Business,
Right.
sliding around the house in my oversized dress shirt and tube socks. But I just realized how old I am. And I'm not even that old. I'll be 36 next month. And I got home. I got a workout in. I watched the Four Nations face-off, which we'll discuss later in the program. Watched the Duke game. Fell asleep watching those things, or right after those things were over. And then I was up at 5:30 this morning. So, party at my house, I guess.
Hey, sometimes as I need to shut down my volume on my computer.
Turn down your radio,
Yeah.
Derek.
Sometimes, man, you think, okay, now I got the house to myself. Now I can just, do what I want. And then you realize I don't want to do anything.
Exactly.
I just want to sit down.
Right.
I just want to sit down and watch
quiet.
television. Yeah.
I
have quiet.
had a whole bed to myself
Uh-huh.
because more often than not, my son eventually ends up in our bed at some point in the evening. So I'm usually sharing a bed with my wife and a 3-year-old. So to actually have the room to stretch out, that was very nice. I don't take that for granted. But we will discuss the Four Nations face-off. A highly entertaining game last night. Canada defeats Sweden in overtime. The United States plays tonight against UC Saros, starting in net for Finland. Elliot Freeman will join us at 1 o'clock for our weekly conversation with Elliot, who was at the game last night. We'll talk some Predators. We'll do some big picture talk on the Predators as well. But I want to start with a couple of quick hitters. As you heard in the Game Center update before our show, the New York Jets have made it official. They have informed Aaron Rodgers that they will be moving in a different direction at the quarterback position. We talked a lot about Aaron Rodgers earlier this week. The team put out a statement saying it was important to have the discussion now to provide clarity and enable each of us the proper time to plan for our respective futures. We want to thank him for the leadership, passion, and dedication he brought to the organization and wish him success moving forward. All told, Aaron Rodgers started 18 games, won 6 of them, had an Achilles tear, and countless headlines in his 2 years with the Jets. But throw him on the pile of potential quarterbacks for the Tennessee Titans. It's official. Aaron Rodgers out in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, especially in this situation, how everything sort of materialized and, they didn't get anywhere close to what they envisioned when they brought Aaron Rodgers in and the guys he wanted to bring in. They didn't visualize that it would be ending with a 5-11 record. What was it, 5-11 or 5-12? 5-12 record. The defense really didn't get no better. You really didn't develop anybody on the offensive side of the ball outside of Garrett Wilson. So it was just a colossal failure. And with Aaron Glenn coming in as new head coach, he wanted to just a clean slate. I'm sure he respects Aaron Rodgers, and obviously by the statement, you thank him for being a teammate and a leader on that team. But in situations like this with aging quarterback, and it hadn't worked in 2 years, you got to move on. And I don't think anybody thought it wouldn't happen. It was just, when, because, will they do it early or will they do it late? Because if they do it post June 1st, they get a bigger salary cap hit. Now they may defer it until June 1st, so it may not come official into June 1st.
I forget the trick of June 1st.
Yeah,
It spreads the money out a different way.
Yeah, it spreads it out a different way. So they may have just said, you know what? We don't even want to wait to June 1st. We're going to announce it, and then we're going to do what we need to do, which means they're going to carry more of the salary cap for, I think it's a longer period of time.
Here are the particulars. The Jets are likely to release Rodgers with a post-June 1st designation. To do that, they must carry him on the roster until March 12th, the start of the league year, March 12th. At that point, they can release him, which will allow them to split the remaining cap charges, $49 million, over 2 years. $14 million in 2025, $35 million in 2026. In this scenario, his current cap hit, $23.5 million, will be on their books until June 2nd, and then it drops to $14 million, a net savings of $9.5 million. In the meantime, he will be free to sign elsewhere on March 13th. Presumably, he will be granted permission to speak with teams before that.
So so you can designate it
Yeah.
on June 1st, but the bottom line is, for the Titans' purposes and anybody else that might want to take a kick at the can, he'll be available on March the 13th or whatever.
Right. But as the article states, I imagine that the Jets are like, yeah, go ahead and talk to whoever you want to talk to.
Right. And he's gonna be getting paid, right? Or is this all already money that he's been paid?
He stopped getting paid as of because it all depends. Some teams pay you per weekly, every week, which ends when the season ends. Some teams pay you every 2 weeks, which it spreads it out until I think May, somewhere around there, once, and that's how they used to do it. And once, because the Titans were a, twice a month team, basically, 1st and 15th, they would pay you. But then you would get that money spread out for a longer period of time. When you were not working, you still would be getting checks. So it just depends how they do it. Now, if they do it every week, then he stopped getting paid the minute the season was over, however they calculated it. So he's not owed any more monies moving forward. It's just the salary for next year.
I wonder how he's going to, with his camp, do this now. Like, does he take his recruitment to the teams, or does he sit back and say, let's see who calls us?
Here's an interesting note from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. Clarity on what's next for Aaron Rodgers. Per NFL rules, if a club announces that they are terminating a vested veteran, other clubs are able to talk to him. No tryout or signing is permitted.
Another thing I'm wondering, too, does he play the card? Because I would imagine he will, to some degree, to say, I'm not sure if I want to play. And deep down, he might have a feeling of, I think I want to play, but I don't want to embarrass teams. I don't want to go down the road of talking to every team. There's only a few teams that I'm willing to play for. I'm willing to not play. Kind of like Ryan Tannehill basically said he was doing. He's like, if I see a situation I think looks really promising, I can't turn it down, then I'll play. But I'm not just going to go out there and just play for anybody. Do you think he might do that, Rodgers?
I think he's in a position, in a sense, to do that. And when I say position, I mean, he's old enough and he's played long enough where he can just retire if he chose to. That's what he can do. Or he can sit and wait and say, you know what? In my mind, these are the few teams that I would love to talk to. And if they want to talk to me, then we can make it happen. But outside of that, yeah, he doesn't have the power as far as I want to bring this guy and this guy. He doesn't have that anymore. But he does have the power because he's played so long. If he wants to retire, he can retire.
Right. And I think knowing that, this is a problem. I don't know about a problem. It's a factor. If the Titans want to get into that game of, we'd like to see what Aaron Rodgers' interest level is. We've got a game plan of how we might be able to sell him if this is what we want. But keep in mind, I think the Titans are best off looking at several options. You can't put all your eggs into the Aaron Rodgers basket. The problem is if Aaron Rodgers is sitting back going, I'm not sure if I'm going to play, and he strings it out, he waits to see into the summer who's out there.
But then that would be to his disadvantage.
Maybe, unless he knows after a certain point he's the best guy out there.
Oh, okay.
Which might happen, right?
Yeah.
Depending on what happens with Darnold and some of the other, I guess, more attractive options.
Yeah.
And then if you sit there and wait for Rodgers and he ends up not being your quarterback, you could get left at the altar, which is what happened sort of back in the day when they lost out on the Peyton Manning. They went all in to try to get Peyton Manning. And remember, he was an unknown. He'd come off a pretty serious neck injury, and it was quite the process physically to get back.
Mhm.
And you weren't quite sure what Peyton Manning you were going to see. But ultimately, they lost. They threw everything at him. He lost out, or the Titans lost out to the Broncos, and then the Titans had to go scramble and find a quarterback. Fortunately, they found Matt Hasselbeck, who they got a good season out of, and I think they were 9-7 the next year. So it could have been a lot worse, but they spent a lot of time and energy on the Peyton Manning recruitment, and they missed out on a lot of other things that they could have been doing in the meantime.
So that is something to keep an eye on, by the way. Al on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, party at Adam's house. I'll bring 312 pizza and green Gatorade.
Yellow.
By the way,
you will not be getting in if you bring that green
Nashville's
Gatorade.
Nashville's best deal this week is 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. That was not a plant, but a check is in the mail, Al. 312 Pizza Company serves the best pizza in town, as well as Chicago-style eats like Chicago dogs, Italian beef sandwiches, and more. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals now to get a half off a $30 gift card to 312 Pizza Company while supplies last. You can use that gift card to bring me pizza, but don't stay away with the green Gatorade.
Exactly.
I want lemon lime Gatorade, which is yellow.
Which is yellow.
Another interesting piece of news that came out this morning. The NFL released the list of players invited to the 2025 Combine. The Combine will take place in Indianapolis, as it normally does, from February 24th through March 3rd. Again, 329 prospects, but there's one interesting tidbit within this gigantic list. Travis Hunter of Colorado has been invited and listed as a defensive back. He is listed underneath the defensive backs. He is not listed underneath the wide receivers. What do we make of that?
Listen, I said this yesterday, and I take it to be true, I believe, is that if you're going to draft, because this is what I think Travis Hunter will do, because his skills are not totally refined on the offensive side of the ball, because he still has a lot of work to do. Hell of an athlete, but I think he's still, to play at this level and be that type of receiver, he has some work to do. So you go into the Combine, and what is the Combine for? And I don't think he's going to run or anything, but the Combine is for, how do I raise my stock at whatever position or whatnot. So you go into the Combine, there's probably 2 other defensive backs that would be considered in your class, the kid from Texas and then the kid from Michigan. Everybody else is a tad bit below that. So you go into the Combine as a corner. Now I get to display, if I choose to do my drills, which, man, knowing Travis Hunter, he'll do them. Knowing him, he will do the drills. He wants to show them how much of a natural athlete and defensive back he is. So I can show him that better as a defensive back. If I try to do that as a wide receiver, I think there may be some things that they're going to look at and be like, man, do we have time to work with that if we're going to draft a number 1?
And he's trying to play corner as well.
Exactly. So you go in as a cornerback, you may get drafted a little bit higher because it's between you, Will Anderson, and another guy from Texas. So you go in and you're thinking, I can get drafted higher as a defensive back than I can as a wide receiver. Let me go out here and let me talk to these coaches. Let me let them know what's the deal. And then when I go back for my pro day, I'm going to work a lot at wide receiver because now I've had a little bit more time with my trainer to work on a wide receivers drill. So now when I go into my pro day, they've already seen me as a defensive back at the Combine. If he chose to run, to do drills, he may not run, but do the drills. Now I'm here on my pro day. Now I get to display my wide receiver skills after I've really truly honed in on them during this period. Because he would have I think a month after the Combine, or maybe even a month and a half, depending on when he wants to do his pro day, to train in between that. So I think it's a good decision by him. And however it works out, I think he will ultimately, unless he just go there and just does horribly and and shows that he's not in shape, he's still going to be a top 5 pick to me.
This is, I think, a very central question of this draft is, can he sell himself as the unicorn that can do both jobs? It's a great question. You laid it out perfectly. The nuances of playing those positions. It's so specialized now in the sports world. I think maybe back in the let's even take when Charles Woodson came out, or Champ Bailey, guys who did it in college. It was hard. It was hard for them to do it in the pros. I'll take one from a little more of my skill set or experience. When you're a two-way player in baseball on the college level, right? There used to be, when I was coming up through the college ranks, a lot of guys, even at top SEC schools, that pitched and played in the position when they weren't pitching, right? There were still a lot of guys that were good enough baseball players to do that. Fast forward to today, there's a lot of recruits that are brilliant up through high school, pitching and dominating in the position. But when you get to these great programs now, like Tennessee or LSU or Vanderbilt, it's really hard. You might get on campus thinking, yeah, I can do both. I'll do both. But for the reasons you pointed out, D-Mace, the nuances, the little things that separate a wide receiver from being a good athlete who can play and dominate at the college level, but you have to have the details to succeed as a pro. It's so hard to do both and play the other position, right? And so you might have to choose one or the other. And so I think that's going to be a key question here is Hunter so good as an athlete that he can be productive at both? Because to me, that's what would separate him and be the guy that you would trade for the first pick for.
Yeah, it seems to me, and I just scrolled through here, there are more, and I'm sure it is, because when you invite defensive backs, you're counting safeties as well, counting corners and safeties. There seem to be more, and it's not much more, but there are more wide receivers, I believe, than there are DBs.
Okay, so let's take the wide
going
receiver
into the combine.
So you might be a scout and saying, okay, Travis Hunter, if he became just a wide receiver, he might end up being the best wide receiver, maybe. But if he's playing wide receiver while he's also playing corner, I might take the more polished wide receiver on this list.
Exactly.
And then the same thing might happen at corner, right? Where you say, well, if he just became a corner and he put all of his work into the details and the craft of being a corner, man, he's going to be a great corner.
Exactly.
But he's also trying to play wide receiver. So is he going to be able to, in the drills, spend all the time he needs to separate himself at the best level in the world?
And again, I know all the people that are screaming, Deion's going to pump it. He is. He's going to pump it. He has every right to. He should. But this notion, and I don't know where people are getting this from. Playing that many plays in college and trying to play that many plays in the pros ain't the same. It's not apples to apples, okay? If you watch, he's basically, because you don't, in college football, there's not a 1-to-1 ratio, means I got one elite person, you got one elite person. It's not like that. In the NFL, these guys are grown men. Now, there maybe some that are better than others, but these guys are leaning on you, pushing you, hitting you all game. They're not doing that at the college level. Sometimes he may go a series without tackling anybody, or 2 series without even touching somebody at the defensive back position. Or at the wide receiver position, he may go a series without anybody touching him. You get the physicality of this game. And the people that say he can play both sides and be elite at it, they know good and well it can't happen. No.
And it's never happened, right?
It won't happen. It will not.
He's not a unicorn.
He's a unicorn in the sense of there's not too many like athletes out there that can do what he does, both offensively and defensively, and did it in college. Let's say that. But when you come to the NFL, it's a grind. It is he will not play that many plays in a NFL season if he comes close to that, he will not have a long career. And the people that keep saying that, I don't know if they're saying that just to hype him up. He don't need hyping up. He won a Heisman.
I do have something I want to touch on when it comes to the two-way player thing. And we'll do that next. 615-737-1025 if you have thoughts on the NFL draft. Travis Hunter invited to the NFL Combine as a defensive back. Also, the Jets have officially announced that they will be parting ways with Aaron Rodgers. 615-737-1025. Tune into 1025, 1063 The Game tonight for coverage of the duel at Daytona. Coverage will begin at 5 with the race starting at 6, presented by Green Trees and the new Cumberland.com. Race broadcast is also available on the 1025 The Game app and at thegamenashville.com.
All right, let's tell you about Loan Pronto. Remember, their phone number, 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. How can they help you? Well, if you're a homeowner and you're looking for cash, you've got a financial plan for 2025. The weather's getting a little warmer. You want to do, for example, a home remodel. You've got a patio vision. You've got a bathroom you want to upgrade or a kitchen. You want to knock out a wall, create another room. You need cash to do that. You want to make your home even more valuable in the process. Loan Pronto can get you that money, and they are the leader in quickly converting your home's equity into cold, hard cash. No paperwork, no cumbersome process, no junk fees, often not even an appraisal is necessary. So one client got $150,000 off, paid off a car loan, and did a home improvement project. And in the process, their monthly expenses were even better as a result. So get approved in as little as 1 day with no hard credit pull. 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Get the money you need. Loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
They've been struggling a while to get the quarterback they need. So you got Ward and Sanders going 1-2 respectively. Then number 3, you got Travis Hunter going to the Giants. Here's the big thing with Travis Hunter always that we ask. Are teams scouting him as a two-way player, or are they favoring him for one position over the other?
He's one of those players that you just say, which position does he play? I just say all of the above. There isn't a position that he cannot play on the field just because he can play corner, he can play receiver. But if I was a general manager drafting Travis Hunter, I would play him at cornerback full time. And then I would have a design package of 10 to 20 plays throughout games for him to really display his talents as a wide receiver. But talking to scouts in the league, there is a thought process of where you just get him in the building, you draft him, and you let him figure that out on his own just because he's such a special player. This is a two-way player that we have not seen in a very long time, really since Champ Bailey when he was coming out in the late 90s, and he ended up being a defensive back full-time.
Yeah, but if you're the Giants.
That was Jordan Reed, ESPN NFL draft analyst. That was last month. But with the news that Travis Hunter is attending the NFL Combine as a defensive back, we're bringing that back up. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. This is what I wanted to get to, gentlemen, before the break. I feel like people are inflating the impact that Deion Sanders had on the offensive side of the ball. Deion did it. Deion did do it, but his impact on the offensive side of the ball was negligible. I found a feature on ESPN.com. It doesn't have a date on it, but judging by the way this website looks, this is an old ass article. This is like the advent of the internet. This was the story. It was about Deion Sanders and his athletic prowess. With Dallas, quote, with Dallas, he started at the cornerback and wide receiver to become a full-time two-way NFL player. The first since Chuck Bednarik from 1949 through 1962. Deion Sanders caught 36 passes for 475 yards and a touchdown on offense and simply minded his half of the field while teams avoided him on defense. The Cowboys determined he was on the field for 50% of their offensive plays and 80% on defense. I just think that
it was really the only year. I'm looking at his year by year. He played from 1989 to 2000. And the year he did this was 1996, which it was not the year where Dallas won a Super Bowl. In fact, in 96, I'm trying to remember how they did, but they weren't a great team. It was a little bit out of necessity that he had to play some wide receiver. Like when he was with Dallas and they won the Super Bowl, he only caught 2 passes. He only played 9 games. Like he never did it with San Francisco, and they won the Super Bowl with him in 94.
He didn't do it with Atlanta.
In Atlanta, just a little spot here and there. He was with the Falcons for 4 years, and he caught 11 passes in the 4 years. So he didn't come into the league doing that. Remember, he was playing baseball as well. So I mean, this guy was
he could do it.
He was a true unicorn. I mean, he was a good baseball player too, shuttling back and forth in some cases. But he was really only for 1 year a two-way player. And out of an 11-year, 12-year career.
My point is, I think people are overstating Travis Hunter's potential impact on both sides of the ball. I know he played, like 1,500 combined snaps at Colorado this past season. I'm not taking away from his athleticism, which is off the charts. But I know that Teron Davenport is fond of saying that if he had to make a position for him, it's PM, playmaker. And I completely understand that.
He is a playmaker.
Right. I just think that people might be overstating like just how much of an impact he can have on both sides of the ball in the NFL.
That team, by the way, in 96, where he caught the 36 passes for the Cowboys, they had won Super Bowls in 3 of the previous 4 years, 91, 92, 93, 95. In 96, they went 10-6, not quite as dominant, won the wild card game, and then lost to, if you remember, Kerry Collins and the Panthers. They had a really good year, one of their first years in the league, and they surprisingly got to the NFC Championship game and lost to Brett Favre and the Packers, just to sort of ring a bell. And then the following year, they kind of dropped off, the Cowboys. So it was a little bit towards the end of the Cowboy window.
I just think that that one season where Deion Sanders had some numbers on the offensive side of the ball, the further we're removed from it, I feel like the more we're making of it.
Yeah.
that
Now,
make
as a
sense?
returner, he was a dynamic
Oh, yeah,
returner
he-
throughout. That
yeah.
was the other thing he
I'm
brought
talking
to the table.
specifically about
Yeah.
playing receiver.
Listen, we know how this goes. The further away you get from a story, the greater it gets, and
The
the bigger it
legendary,
gets. The
yeah.
legend builds. Like it's just like year after year or decade. It's just like the legend of Deion Sanders is built. He went from catching. Oh, he was he played baseball and he returned kicks. To all of a sudden now, man, he was dominant on the offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball. He returned kicks. So the legend just continues to grow, and it has no merit whatsoever in regards to the offensive side of the ball. He had one season basically really out of necessity that he had to play that position. He didn't play it much coming into the league, and he didn't play it at all leaving the league. Again, Deion Sanders is probably the greatest athlete we've seen, well, at least I've seen. Probably him and Bo
Bo
going
Jackson,
back and
yeah.
forth because I've seen both of them playing their respective sports. Both of them play baseball, and both of them play football. But this notion that Travis Hunter could come in and just let him figure it out. No, I didn't draft you number one to let you figure it out what's Saturday. That don't even make sense. It makes no sense. Oh, we're going to draft you number one overall or number two or number three. And when we get you in the camp, just figure it out. You figure out which. No, I'm going to play you over here, and then we're going to go from there. Again, I'm not saying that the young man couldn't go on the offensive side of the ball every so often and you design plays for him because Teron is right. He is a playmaker. Just get the ball in his hands. And the way the NFL is now, just imagine that year, Deion Sanders played 50% of the plays. Hey, Willie, what were they doing back in those days offensively? Back in those days, they were running the football, right?
A lot higher percentage of the time.
A lot
Yeah.
high, especially the Dallas Cowboys.
Yes,
They were running.
They had a guy named Emmitt Smith.
Exactly, a massive offensive line, and all of them damn near, I think, in the Hall of Fame. But anyway, so when you're throwing the ball and you're running a football, and it probably averages out to be 60 plays a game, probably. So you're probably less than that at times. So you're playing maybe, 20 plays on offense, but you're playing basically all of the plays on defense. And then the plays that you're playing on offense, all of it doesn't call for you to give your maximum effort. So to me, just times that by 100. Travis Henry will have to play, if he's playing, let's just say he played 50% of the plays. He's playing 40. He's playing probably about 35, close to 40 plays on some offenses. And then on defense, because they score so fast or they score a lot, you're going to be playing just that many plays on defense. And they want you to play full time on defense. It's physically and mentally damn near impossible to do it at the NFL level and be elite at both of them. He can be elite at defensive back, and if you just want him to go out there and run 10, 15 plays or 12 plays, okay, that's cool. But to say he's going to be my number 2 receiver or number 3 receiver, if you haven't played receiver or haven't played defensive back, you shouldn't make the determination whether he can do it or not. But if you have played those, you would understand how hard it is physically, but then how hard it is mentally. These plays, I think people, and this is what sort of gets me at times, people think that the IQ of an NFL player or a basketball player, whatever, it's not high. That's not the case. Like guys can't retain things and can't learn. That's not the case. If I was to give you the book that it's basically an encyclopedia, and I tell you, Adam, I'm going to give you this book. When did they get drafted? April. So we're talking May. I'm going to give you this book in May. And you got to learn everything by August. The average person is going to be like, no, I can't do this. Here, you just keep it. It takes a certain level of mental sort of have that capacity to retain all of this stuff. So not only from a physical standpoint, you got to go out there and you got to get the job done. But when it's 95 degrees, 100 degrees out there, it becomes more mental now. So you got to not only learn all this stuff physically, but mentally you got to learn all this stuff. That just takes so much out of you. Let them play defensive back. And we can throw them in there 10, 15 plays, probably 12.
All right, here's
That's
another
a wide
question.
receiver.
Chase, the suit just popped in. Asked D-Mace during our commercial break a really good question. Could Travis Hunter be a returner?
Oh, definitely. If I'm drafting him, I'm drafting him as a defensive back in my returner, my punt returner.
Now, here's something that I learned today. Do you know how many kicks he returned at Colorado and Jackson State?
I don't think many.
0.
And I was surprised
He
that they didn't have
He
him
was
out
not
there.
a return man at Colorado. I guess he had to have a break sometime.
Yeah, I guess so.
He's playing all these plays. But at Jackson State for a season and Colorado for a season, he was not the return man. So he would have to learn that. I mean, I think he could do it, but he hasn't done it.
That tells me, because if they've never put him out there, that tells me he has trouble catching the football.
Interesting.
From that, that type.
So I wouldn't make the assumption if I'm drafting him that he could just be a returner. This is a way we could use it.
615-737-1025. If you have any thoughts on Travis Hunter, call us, text us 615-737-1025. Coming up next, however, an old friend might be re-entering the chat. We'll discuss that coming up next. But before we do, tune into 94.9 The Fan tonight for Vanderbilt women's basketball as the Commodores take on Mississippi State at Memorial Gym with an 8 o'clock tip-off and the pregame show beginning at 7:45. Vanderbilt women's basketball presented by Athletes Unlimited Pro Basketball coming to Nashville's Municipal Auditorium now through March 2nd. Go to auprobasketball.com for more details and to purchase tickets.
Duval.
Duval. It's bad. It's bad.
Duval.
Again, if you haven't seen that clip of Liam Cohen doing that, go watch it.
Duval.
It's bad. But the reason why I bring up the Jacksonville Jaguars is reportedly the boogeyman, aka John Robinson. I think he's like the boogeyman for Titans fans. When everything has gone wrong, it's John Robinson. John Robinson. He's the boogeyman. He's coming to get you. But John Robinson is reportedly interviewing for the Jacksonville Jaguars GM position. And that whole saga has been quite strange. Let me make sure I have this right. At the end of the season, they fired Doug Peterson, but retained Trent Baalke. Liam Cohen, I believe, interviewed for the job, but pulled himself out because Trent Baalke was still there. And then they fired Trent Baalke. Then Liam Cohen's like, okay, that's fine. Now I'll come back. I think that's what happened. I think that's a loose outline of what happened there. But they have a coach. They do not have a GM. And the NFL Combine is about a week and a half away. So John Robinson is getting an interview. He interviewed for the Jets job, which he ultimately didn't get. But the fact that he's getting another job, perhaps he is starting to work himself back on the radars of NFL teams. We've talked about this many times before, that unlike other leagues, I mean, I use the NHL obviously as an example, as that's the league that I cover. The same GMs are recycled. When a team fires their general manager, some guy who was the general manager somewhere else for many, many years is ultimately in the mix. That doesn't seem to happen in the NFL. But I've heard Jared talk about it. I heard Joe talk about it today with Paul Kaharski. This idea that, hey, if John Robinson gets back in the game and he gets back in the game for a division rival, there's that scoreboard element, right? Like if John Robinson gets the Jags job and he can turn that team around, will that change our opinion on things that have happened here? I completely understand that point of view. I do think it's interesting, though, the idea of it. Like, will he get the job? I don't know. But the idea of him not only getting a job, but getting the job in the division.
I love the intrigue.
Yeah.
This is right up your alley as
Maximum
a sports
chaos.
writer, right? I mean, it's just as exciting sports stories to cover.
Yes, absolutely.
If you listen, whether he gets the job or not, let's just say he gets the job. How intriguing is this job to John Robinson? It has to be very intriguing. Even though there are reports out that the Pittsburgh Steelers called the Jacksonville Jaguars to inquire about their quarterback Trevor Lawrence. I know that's out there, and it would be crazy if they go that route to trade Trevor Lawrence. But when you have a new coach coming in, but I can't imagine Liam Cohen going into a season and then saying, I'm trading my quarterback to potentially draft another or something. I can't see that happen. But if you're coming into a situation, you got your quarterback, you got your running back, you got a receiver that may be one of the best, if not the best young receiver out there, in Brian Thomas Jr. You have a defense, you have a hell of a tight end. This is a job that now it seems like Jacksonville may be getting things in order after getting rid of Baalke. This may be the best job out there, the Jacksonville Jaguar job. It may be the best job. And if John Robinson, if he gets the job and if he can do what he did for the Titans, man, oh man, Tennessee, you better get it right. Because again, they have everything that you don't have.
They've got the quarterback.
They have the quarterback. They have the top flight wide receiver. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is a little bit better. I think his ceiling is higher than what Calvin Ridley's ceiling is. Christian Kirk's coming back. You got a hell of a tight end. You got a defense. You got a team.
Etienne's a pretty darn good running back.
You got a team ready to win now.
I still don't know how they got that bad. It's like, how are they that bad? It's a little bit like the Predators this year. You're looking at their players and going, how could they be this bad? That's what happened to Jacksonville this last year. So it is a really interesting ceiling that you might have coming in as a GM. My question would be this. and I'm curious how Titans fans feel about that. Like, hey, do you want him going back into your division to be a GM? Because if you're a Titans fan, you're remembering the really good times, but you're also remembering the last few drafts where it really went bad, and we're still living that every day here, the effects on the Titans from those drafts. And to be fair, because I hear Jared always showcasing he won 61% of his games, which is a great number relative to GMs who have been in the league that long. 61% is a really high winning percentage. It's the best in franchise history. Even go back to the Oilers. It's right there among the best GMs in history for the Oilers/Titans franchise. However, he left, or he got fired on an impulsive move before he should have. But also, to be fair, the clouds were forming, and you knew that the bad drafts were going to have an effect. And so my question, if I'm the Jaguars, is this. John, I see your record. It's really good. Tell me about these drafts, and tell me about one other thing. What did he sort of proudly say he was about? He was old school. People would ask him about, hey, John, you really don't have much of an analytics division at all in your department. And he was like, yeah, I don't think it's a big deal. I'm an eye test guy. Yeah, I've got some analytics, but he clearly was old school and was not a modern change with the times. So has he evolved from that? I don't know what the Jaguars do or don't do in analytics, but I would have to think they've got something down there.
Yeah.
How does he feel about it now, all these years later, Robinson? Can he change with the times? Because we've seen plenty of football people. If you don't change with the times, you get left behind.
Yeah. And listen, Titan fans, there are some of you that may think, oh, I don't want him to go to Jaguars. And there's some that may say, I don't care. But I don't think you can look at Jacksonville and if he had success, say, oh, we should have kept him in Nashville, we would have had that same success. There is a possibility, yes, but then again, you got to understand the circumstance he would be going into with Jacksonville. He goes into Jacksonville, everybody saying, yeah, you should win with this roster. You should. There's no, oh, man, he's going to take this roster. It's all messed up. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have playmakers. He's going to take this roster, and he's going to build them up. When you take that job, John Robinson, based upon your history here and your winning percentage, people expect, oh, you should be winning AFC South next year or competing, like really competing and pushing Houston to win AFC South. And in that turn, you get a playoff spot. He's not going in with oh, man, let's see what he's going to do. No, he would be going in thinking, everybody would be going in thinking this is a 10-11 win team. So if he does that, I don't think Tennessee Titan fans should look at it and say, see, that's what we could have had. No, your roster isn't that roster. So you never were going to have that.
615-737-1025. Our question to all of you at 615-737-1025. Do you like the idea of John Robinson potentially rejoining the AFC South as GM of the Jacksonville Jaguars? There's that scoreboard element, as Jared likes to say. Just like now that Mike Vrabel is head coach of the New England Patriots. We'll see what he does with the Patriots, and we'll know who the problem was. Was it Mike Vrabel or the Titans? And this situation would also apply. So your thoughts on John Robinson potentially rejoining the division as Jags GM. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
Hey, this is Derek Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. But if you set out to lose some weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a resolution or some type of goal to shed some extra pounds only to face disappointment. But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the struggle and frustration of this cycle, and that's why they offer you a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D-Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. We were just talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars reportedly interviewing John Robinson for their vacant GM job. John Robinson interviewed for the Jets job. He didn't get it. The Jags need a GM. They've kind of done this whole thing backwards, but they do need a GM. And the question I have for all of you at 615-737-1025, would you welcome John Robinson back into the AFC South? What do you like about that possibility? Matt on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, even if J-Rob does well in Jacksonville, that doesn't erase all of the terrible first-round picks he made in Nashville. He can do well in Jacksonville, and the Titans made the right move letting him go. Both things can be true.
I think he has a point. That's why, again, either you can look at it from, that lens that Matt is looking at it from. And I'm not saying that he's true. Yeah, it worked out here. It was working out here, but he had some misses in there. So it wasn't all, gravy. But again, Titan fans, this is not comparing apples to apples here. If he has some success or immediate success in Jacksonville, it's nobody can look at it and say, oh man, this was totally unexpected. They have a good team. They just didn't have the right people leading them. And now that you got Liam Cohen, and if John Robinson takes the job, I would assume, and it's sort of like I don't know if they overlap. Was Liam Cohen in Tampa when the year? No, because he had already left and Liam Cohen wasn't in Tampa. But I'm sure they've had some interactions together. And if that sort of coach and GM hits, they already got the roster. So Titan fans, I wouldn't look at it as, oh, he could have, this is what he would have done here. No, we still haven't found a quarterback. We don't have the playmakers that Jacksonville has, especially on offense.
Tyler on our text line says, John Robinson had his screw-ups, but I think the idea of him rejoining the division is not good for the Titans. I think he'll do a good job with the Jags because he always had a winning team, and the Jags roster is way better than what the Titans have now. If he fails, then the validation is nice, but I think the chances of that are low. So let's look at the Jags roster for a second. So what are the most important positions you need to have a successful team? Of course, quarterback is number one. And I would say that Trevor Lawrence's NFL career has been uneven.
Very uneven.
I think that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
It's
much more mistake prone than I think people thought they would get.
And he's dealt with a lot of injuries that I don't think people really knew.
Yeah. And that you couldn't account for when he came out. Like you wouldn't have thought that could happen, but we know that in general, injuries can have an effect. So they've definitely had an effect. What I think has been most surprising to me is when he's played, he's been prone to a lot of mistakes. He's had stretches where he turns the ball over too much.
But he showed that his last year at Clemson, that there was some mistakes he was prone to make, even though people felt that he was a generational. I didn't finish it all. I didn't finish it.
You didn't put the L on it. Generation. No, I didn't say it. I didn't say the L.
Yeah, but even though that was the case, there were still some mistakes that he was making, even at the college level. So, again, this isn't comparing apples to apples. But when you look at the positions, as you said, let's just first start with the quarterback position. I would say that's a plus.
They have a 22-year-old receiver
plus
in Brian Thomas Jr., who had more than 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns last season. So that's a plus. I would say they have a top-of-the-line pass rusher in Josh Hines-Allen as well. So plus, I feel like they've got their bases covered at some important positions.
They got a good corner in Tyson Campbell. That's a plus. They have, listen, if just look at this. Oh, okay. If this was the Titans team, just say this was the Titans team. Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Brian Thomas, Kristen Kirk, Gabe Davis, Evan Ingram, and then their offensive line. What would your expectations be?
You'd rather have their roster than
Yeah,
the
that's what I'm
Titans
saying.
roster right
What
now.
would your
And it's
expectations
hands
be
down, right?
going into the season? If this was your team, it's just your offense, your expectations would be extremely high, right? So you don't have that here in Nashville right now. You have a couple pieces here and there, but are they the pieces that you feel is going to continue to develop and get to that point where they are one of the tops in the game? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't think so. But again, it's not comparing apples to apples. This roster is just totally different. And if this roster was here, I would be thinking 11, possibly 12 games.
Wes from Hermitage is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Wes, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Oh, good afternoon, morning, whatever it is, guys. Dude, I love this. I could not be happier about something besides maybe the Mike Vrabel going to the Patriots thing. This is going to be awesome. For the last 2 years, all I've heard about, I stand on the table for J-Rob. Like, no, he shouldn't have been fired when he was fired. I think that if she would have gave him another chance, we would be okay. And I think this team would look a lot better if J-Rob had kept his job. And all I've heard about was just how awful he was as a GM of the Titans and how they're so glad he's gone. Well, now he's in your division, possibly. So I can't wait, because all these Titans fans who have hated J-Rob and were so glad he was gone, well, now he's going to be your nemesis 2 times a year. And you get to look at that man and see, was it him or was it Amy, really, at the end of the day? And I couldn't be more excited about what's to come for this next football season, man.
Thanks for the call, Wes. Now, we have to stress that John Robinson is only interviewing for the
Yes.
position.
Yeah.
He has not been hired as Jaguars general manager. The hit rate for GMs getting second chances in the NFL is relatively low. So if I had to guess, he's probably not going to get this job unless
I don't know. I have no idea.
I would like I don't know the other list of candidates.
Mhm.
I'm just making the assumption based on the fact that a lot of GMs don't get that second chance.
I'm
But
curious.
I wonder if
what-
because of the timeline here,
Mhm.
if they would rather go with someone with experience, knowing that they have to dive right in. The combine's about to start. The NFL draft is around the corner. The Jags have the 5th pick in the draft. Maybe that gives Robinson a leg up in this situation.
Another thing that Wes said that made me think,
Mhm.
I certainly at the time
Mhm.
was shocked that they made the move to
Yeah.
fire him in the middle of the season. I thought that was rash, shooting from the hip,
Mhm.
impulsive, wild card. We called all of the above,
Everything.
right? It was
Yes.
like, what? That was a panic move.
Mhm.
So I don't think there was a whole lot of glad to see him go
Mhm.
that Wes put it. I think that's not my recollection of how it felt. Like, she did it. So it was like,
Mhm.
well, I guess they have to move forward, right? I wasn't happy that they did it. Now, I think as we've moved forward, you saw that the weak drafts that they had did really much make it tough on his successor, and it would have made it tough on him.
Mhm.
But I think he did a good job as a GM. I wasn't sitting there going, they need to fire the GM. They need to fire the GM. I was not thinking that was the solution when they started to struggle.
Mhm.
And I believe they were still 7-5
Mhm.
after that game against Philadelphia, where
I believe that is correct.
they
Yeah.
pulled the plug.
I think ultimately what happened was going to happen regardless. That's just me. I thought this team was on, and that was something I had been screaming. So to see it happen, it wasn't a surprise. The only surprise was that she fired him, period. Not that she fired him in the middle of the season. It was that she fired him, like, period. Like, you and I think that's where some of the Titans fans were at, the ones that West say was that said they were glad he was gone. I don't think it was so much they were glad he was gone. I think once you start thinking about it, like Willie said, it was like, okay, you justify for doing it. Because yeah, he did miss on these first round picks. and it doesn't seem like the roster was getting any better. Yeah, we had our really good season. He won 61% of his games, but now that you fire him, oh, okay, I can see what you're talking about. It's just like being in a relationship. If you've been with somebody and other people are saying things, and then y'all finally break up, and then now you sit back and you think like, well, yeah, I could see what y'all were talking about. So maybe, just maybe, it was better for us to sort of be apart now. That's how it was with Titan fans. They really couldn't see it while they were in it, but once they got out of it, it was like, okay, was it probably the smartest thing to fire him now? No, but it's justified because Isaiah Wilson, Caleb Farley, Bud Dupree, name other guys, Julio Jones. So it's justified once it happens. But while you were in it, you were like, okay, he's a good GM. Let's roll with him.
They're really, when you look at the drafts that John Robinson had at the end and how poor they were, I know the counter argument is, well, look at what the Eagles did. The Eagles made some bad draft picks as well. They drafted Andre Dillard. We all remember how bad Andre Dillard was, right? Mm-hmm. They drafted Jalen Reagor, I believe, right in front of Justin Jefferson. So they've made some bad picks too.
Everybody
Eagles.
does.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that people have a hard time separating the end of look, you said Willie, and Jared says it all the time. He won 61% of his games. He won as many of his games as Bill Walsh. That's the comparison that Jared always makes. But then it's just like, in hindsight, do you feel like we should, I don't know, I don't want to say forgive John Robinson because he did screw those drafts up pretty badly. But I'm wondering what the statute of limitations is on blaming John Robinson. Have we reached that point? Are we past the point where we should be blaming John Robinson for the state of the Titans? Because they hired somebody else. They hired Ran Carthon to clean up the mess, which was, Willie, as you note many times, it wasn't just, a little mess. You spill some water on the floor. It was the time that my then 6-month-old son broke a bottle of barbecue sauce all over the floor and slathered himself in it. That's the type of mess that John Robinson left for the Titans. And Ran Carthon was only able to clean it up a little bit. And now it's up to Mike Morganti. But I'm just wondering, should there be a statute of limitations on how long it is until we can stop blaming John Robinson?
I think there is a statute of limitations, but I think the current roster is still
his roster
very much being affected by the empty years of 2020 to 2022. Just when you think about where those players would be in their career, right? Isaiah Wilson, let's just say, if he turned out to be a starting lineman in the league, he'd be in the prime of his career. He'd be 26, 27. He'd be on his second contract. And it's not a perfect world, but not only did he miss on, right, these guys would be in their prime right now. This would be a nucleus of your roster right now, and they have nothing from that.
Yeah, they completely nothing. And again, when you talk about what is that expiration date, to me it's sort of like college football, not necessarily basketball. College football, from this standpoint, when a college coach comes in and the program has been doing horrible, and I know it changes now because of NIL and all these transfers, typically a coach wants to get a recruiting class in, start to develop that recruiting class. So it's like, let me get 2 recruiting classes, and then I can really start that change. You can really start seeing it, coupled with a few NILs. But if you're doing it just old school style, is let me get 2 recruiting cycles to get my guys in here or girls in here, and then they come into a system that I have established already that they didn't know anything of. And now they're buying into what we are coaching and teaching around here, the culture of the program. It's sort of the same way in the NFL, especially when you've had miss after miss after miss. They fire you for a reason, because either the record is bad, more than likely let's just say consistently the record has been bad, or they see a foreshadowing of it and they're like, okay, let's move on now and try to fix this stuff. Well, I think the Titans were more so of it was one move that I think sent her over the edge, and everybody know what that move is. But I think there were other moves that she was trying to live with. But when that happened, and then you saw the immediate repercussions after that, then it was like, okay, I'm moving on. But then when Rand took over, like y'all said, there was still this residue of just bad drafts. Listen, and again, I know teams sort of work themselves out of it very quickly, but the only way you can work out of that very quickly is what? You have a quarterback.
That would help.
That helps immensely.
Let's just take the three. We've gone through the entire drafts, right? They've got very little to nothing from 3 full drafts. That is a massive hole. Massive hole. You have to really look at it and say that you could argue that is going to not only affect this year's roster in 2025, but still 26, 27. You're still trying to make up ground for that. But let's just look at the 3 first-round picks. Isaiah Wilson, Caleb Farley, and Treylon Burks. You're talking about 3 guys that give you 0. It's one thing to miss on a first-round pick, and he doesn't end up being a great player. But most of the time, if you, quote, miss on a first-round pick, there are levels of missing. You can still get a decent starter, right? You can still get a guy that is on your roster for 4 or 5 years and doing something. Those guys they might as well not have been there. You might as well have just taken a pass on the pick. And on Burks, you traded A.J. Brown for that pick. So that we're talking about not just, hey, they didn't do real well in the draft. We're talking about a catastrophic 3-year period.
Mark is in Nashville on our phone line, driven by Wilson County, Hyundai.com. That wasn't me. We didn't do that. That was David.
I don't know who did that.
Mark.
Yeah, I'm listening, man. Yeah, I told David, D. Mace, Willie, Adam, I said, go ahead and play my little theme music for the day. Y'all get me anyway on it. But hey, how y'all doing today? First of all,
good.
We're doing all right, man.
Thank you for asking.
Hey, y'all touched on everything I'm getting ready to say. I mean, those 3 busted first-round draft picks, y'all, that they drafted under John Robinson's regime, that set that franchise back a long way. It really did. Because like Willie, D. Mace, Adam said, you got nothing out of it. Nothing. I mean, you might as well not even have drafted him. You got totally nothing out of that. And John Robinson kind of had that was his defining moment right there, making those draft picks and stuff. And I guess Amy Adams Strunk just said enough was enough. I don't know if he'll get that job in Jacksonville. I don't think I would touch him, Adam. I really don't. He didn't, like you said, GMs don't get a second chance. And he really mucked it up with that chance he had at Tennessee. And I don't see him really being able to come in and do great things with Jacksonville. He'll get an interview, but I don't see him getting the job. But hey, man, you got Valentine's Day coming up tomorrow, so take care of your loved ones and stuff. Y'all have a good day.
Thanks,
Mark. Hey, David,
quickly.
that's the only time I'm gonna hear that song. That's the last time.
All right. We'll see, but I got you.
All right, y'all have a good one, man. See y'all later, Willie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Mark. Quickly, this is why new GMs, when you have a bad team, and depending on how you sort of took that road to be a bad team, this is why it's imperative for the Titans to get more draft picks, because you don't have the luxury of missing on many now, because this roster is so depleted. Unless you hit on the quarterback, that's just about, let's say lately, how all these franchises have been able to go from the bottom to the top, or from the bottom to the middle of the pack. It's because of the quarterback, not anything else. Houston, the Commanders, at times, Chicago, all of them have one thing in common: the quarterback. You get you a quarterback, then maybe we can expedite the process. But if you don't, then Borgonzi and Brinket is right. We're trying to get as many draft picks as we can. Why? Because we can't afford to miss on many of them. So if we have more darts to throw at the board, good, because we don't have the luxury, because of where our roster is at, to miss on the draft pick.
615-737-1025. Any stray thoughts on that? You can call us, text us, 615-737-1025. But coming up next, we're going to take today and tomorrow to do a bit of a state of the Predators exercise. We're going to do part 1 of that exercise coming up next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet NHL Insider, will join us at 1 o'clock. He was at the Four Nation Face-Off opener last night. A great game between Canada and Sweden, U.S. and Finland tonight. But I thought before we get to Elliot, with the Predators off this week and next week, I thought it would be a good time to take stock of where this organization is. And we're going to do this in two parts. We're going to do one part today. We're going to do one part tomorrow. And this is where we're going to start. We're going to start with someone who is on a hot seat with a majority of the Predators fan base, I would say. And that's Andrew Burnett. Because, of course, when the team struggles as badly as the Predators have struggled this season, all fingers point toward the coach. So this is my question for all of you at 615-737-1025. And I'm also going to ask this question of Willie and Derek. Andrew Burnett is a good coach. He has been the runner-up for the Jack Adams Award, which is the award given to Coach of the Year, 2 of the past 3 seasons. He was the runner-up in 2021-22, and he was the runner-up last season. He took over a Panthers team early in the 2021 season after Joel Quenneville resigned. He coached 75 games. He won 51 of them, 51, 18, and 6. We know what happened last season, franchise record 18-game point streak. Andrew Burnett is a good coach. Here is my question for all of you and to Willie and Derek, and I'll keep it as open-ended as I can. Is Andrew Burnett the right coach for this group? I'm not asking if he's a good coach. I'm asking if he is the right coach for this group. And we will preview. We will talk about Barry Trotz in this exercise tomorrow because there's a lot, they work together. There's the roster situation that's on Barry Trotz. We will talk about Barry Trotz tomorrow, but we're focusing on Andrew Burnett today. We'll start with you, Willie. Is Andrew Burnett the right coach for this group?
It's a difficult question to answer right now because I think he's going to be given time to determine if he's the right coach. But I was really interested to hear his thoughts after the last game they played on Saturday night against Buffalo, where he was really doing some reflecting. This was right after they won a game. Of course, they snapped a 6-game losing streak, but you can tell his tank was a little bit on empty, but he was still willing to answer the question with a little reflectiveness. And I would say just listen to it in his voice, how he's having to really decide how do I try to get this team out of the woods? If you take a look at his young head coaching tenure, it's not like he's coached 15 years in the league and he's had some good teams, some struggling teams, some teams that have gone through the ups and downs. By and large, I don't want to say he's had smooth sailing in the regular season, but relative to most, he hasn't run into a situation where his team just couldn't figure it out like they have this year. And it's a unique situation in which you are supposed to be winning. You have veteran players that have won. But he's having to, I think, do a lot of self-evaluating.
David has that clip. This is the answer Andrew Burnett gave that Willie is referring to.
Bruno, you've talked about how you've wanted to improve this team over the course of your tenure so far. How much of the break are you going to be focused on adjustments or for yourself coaching, maybe changing a few things moving forward?
Yeah, I think you take a couple of days off without you say that, but no, there's lots. There's lots there. And, I wish I had some of the answers for this group, and, I really still don't after 50-some and kind of reassess where I'm at and where our group's at and how can I help them. And there's a few things in mind that, tweak wise, and we got, 4 days of practice, which will be nice, and see if we can come up with a few things. And liked a lot of the things we've done offensively, and I know the results aren't there, but the expected goals and the zone 1 shots and all the things that I believe are important are there. So I'm going to go back and look, and maybe I'm not, maybe they're not that important, but I believe they are. But I think I'll dig into that a little bit, and there's some things defensively I'd like to dig into. So It's hard sometimes during the course where we're at right now to make big adjustments, but I think there's some tweaks that we could do.
So you hear him saying, look, we have to take a little self-evaluation here and decide, how do you want to play? And the one thing that I think Barry Trotz has been very patient with this, and he is going to allow Andrew Brunette to try to, in these last 20 some odd games that they have, which is, a pretty decent sample size, tweak some things. Because I don't think it's as simple as saying he knows how he wants to play. I want the puck. If we don't have the puck, we get the puck. What's your defensive? Well, our defense is having the puck. It just hasn't worked as well. This personnel is different. In fairness to Andrew Brunette, I don't think his defensemen are as effective this year when they don't have the puck as last year's group was. But last year's group did play that system really well. They had the puck more. They were getting more zone time. This year's team has been a little stagnant in that area. They've gotten a reasonable amount of offense. They haven't finished offense with goals. But in the meantime, their defensive zone hasn't been as good. So I think he's looking at that. What could I tweak if I know I'm not going to have maybe the ideal players to play in my system? How do I adjust my system to bring out the best in my players?
And Derek, you mentioned something. We had this conversation, I think it was last week. We were talking about some tweaks that Andrew Brunette could make to his system. And we know that his system is aggressive. It's up-tempo. My friend and ex-colleague, Sean Shapiro, wrote a great story last season about the concepts from soccer that Andrew Brunette has used, pressuring and things of that nature. And it's a fascinating read. I recommend it. But you said that if you're a coach and you're asking me to make changes, significant changes to the way that I coach, which got me to the point that I'm your coach, why even have me as the coach? I'm paraphrasing here, but I believe that was your general idea.
Yeah, it was. And I still stand on that. But it's interesting because, in my world, we did more listening than actual talking, because we're listening, at least while I'm listening to the plays being called. I'm listening to the head coach. I'm listening to my receiver coach in the room. So I'm listening to everybody. I'm doing more listening than I would ever do talking in settings like that. So when people start to talk, I typically I'm listening and I'm trying to pick up key things within their conversation. And I'm listening to Coach Bruno. And maybe that's just his demeanor. He seems more like a laid back. Even when we see him sometimes in the arena, he's kind of like getting to where he needs to go, and he may wave his hands like hi and go about his business. But I think he may just be a laid back guy. But the tone of it didn't sound encouraging to me if I'm a GM. And then when that question is asked, he's like, I don't know. Like, if I equate it to this.
I heard that.
Yeah.
That did stand out to me.
Exactly. And it was like, you don't. And then I know you started to go into other things, but that leads me to this. He has a system that he runs, and that system worked last year for the most part. I mean, at least the second half of the season.
Heck yeah.
And now he's looking at it like, I don't know what more to do. That's when the question is asked of him. He's like, I don't know. There's some little things here and there, but it's not encouraging to me if I'm a GM, because it's like, you're trying to fix it. I know you are, but it's just not right. It's like a father. When I see my son, when he was little, he would try to put something together, and I'm just sitting back and watching. And then I'm thinking like, man, maybe some fresh eyes. Bailey, can you help DJ with that? And then Bailey's able to get it right. Maybe they just need fresh eyes now, because I think, and it's no fault of Andrew Brunette. Right. He's still a good coach.
And that's always the easy thing to do, is just scrap it, bring somebody else in and see if they can do better.
Maybe add somebody to the coaching staff, or
maybe that's the answer. Or Barry. Maybe you want to be a little bit more vocal this offseason.
to Brunette. Maybe you want to, even though I know Barry don't want, that's not what he wants to do. But maybe, just maybe, he may have to step, put his foot in the doorway just a little bit and peek his head in like, hey, okay.
I do think
maybe he has to do that this offseason.
I agree. And I think Andrew Brunette is a brilliant hockey mind. I do think this is where you get tested because everything worked so well last year. He's doing the same thing. He's probably, I haven't done anything. I'm doing the same thing. I'm getting the most frustrating results that I can remember, probably even to his playing days. He probably didn't have as frustrating a time. This is the most snake bit team that I think I've ever seen. But this is what makes you quit. This is really what makes you or breaks you, I think, as a coach over the long haul. And you know who understands that? Barry Trotz.
615-737-1025. My question, as part of the State of the Predators exercise, is Andrew Brunette the right coach? I emphasize right, not good. Right. Is Andrew Brunette the right coach for this group? 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
All right, let's talk League Company. We're talking Predators right now. Elliot Friedman's coming up at 1 o'clock. We'll talk about the Four Nations face-off, which was an absolute top-level sporting event last night. And tonight, you have USA versus UC Saros in Finland. That is going to be great theater as well. League Company is a proud sponsor of our Nashville Predators coverage here on 102.5 The Game. And they've also got you covered in your home. I talk about all the time, year-round coverage, preventive maintenance, be proactive, get ahead of the crisis. You know, if you never treat your air conditioning unit or your furnace, if you just sit there and let it go, eventually it is going to need some maintenance and some repair. But this is the best thing about the home maintenance plan. They're going to be on it every year at League Company. They're going to give you the checkups. They're going to let you know what needs to get done, and you'll get discounts on those repairs in exchange for your monthly membership. The home maintenance plan, I highly recommend it. We've had it at our house for a long time. Our house was built in 1913. It's old. There's no question about it. We need to stay on top of these things. 615-567-1000 or leaguecompany.com. That's 615-567-1000 or leaguecompany.com. League Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Talking Predators, a bit of a State of the Predators address here, part one today. Is Ange Burnett the right coach for this group? Matthew in Nashville on our text line says, is he the right coach? It remains to be seen. However, if they show no improvement these last 20-some-odd games they have left and look as bad or worse through the first half of the season next year, then he needs to be fired. He's not the right coach. Another texter says, no, he is not. He is a good coach with a different roster. And I think that's something that is in play here, guys. And again, we'll talk about the Barry Trotz aspect of this tomorrow. But Ange Burnett's system, we discussed the up-tempo nature of it. It's aggressive. It's relentless, right, Willie, to use the term that they used last season.
That's what he wants to be. But the problem is, I think he would be the first to admit they really haven't had that identity.
They entered the season as one of the oldest teams in the league. They don't have a lot of burners on their team. You watched the Four Nation face-off last night. I know that's best on best, but the Predators don't have someone who moves like Nathan McKinnon or Connor McDavid.
There are two teams that can have guys that move like that. It's the Avalanche and the Oilers.
So
those two guys are on a whole new planet.
And you mentioned something, Willie, about how snake bitten this team is. I looked up this number before the show. The NHL has been tracking shooting percentage since 2009, 2010. So roughly 15 years worth of, or exactly 15 years worth of data on shooting percentage. I looked at single seasons for teams over that span. So there have been 492 single team seasons since 2009, 2010. The Predators at 5-on-5 are shooting this season 6.8%. That ranks 449th out of 492. So they absolutely are snake bitten. Here's the thing I always land on in this conversation now. If the snake bittenness, I made a new word. If the snake bittenness was isolated to a couple of players, Philip Forsberg is having a bad year. Steven Stamkos is having a bad year. Roman Josi is having a bad year. Then I would chalk it up to, man, just some terrible luck. And although there is some terrible luck involved in this, it's team-wide. And to me, I think it's too coincidental to just say, well, it's just all bad luck. I do think there's an element of bad luck in it, but when it covers the entire team, that speaks to a larger issue for me. So to answer my own question, is Andrew Burnett the right coach for this team? I honestly don't know if he is. I think he is a good coach. As I said off the top, I think he is a good coach. If this is the roster that Barry Trotz is going to move forward with, and he may not have much of a choice because of the contracts and such, I'm not sure Burnett is the right coach to maximize this group.
It's a great question, and I think the communication between Andrew Burnett and Barry Trotz will be essential. And the last thing I said during our last segment, I think was important. I think Barry Trotz and David Poile were very patient with one another as the franchise grew, and they had to figure out how to win when they didn't have the resources that other teams had. I think that experience probably helps Barry Trotz and probably gives him a little bit more willingness to say, all right, look, I made the decision to part ways with a coach that he himself said he thought was a good coach doing a good job in John Hynes. And he said, this is my guy. I think Andrew Burnett is a special coach that's worth parting ways with John Hynes to bring in. So there's a little bit of Barry Trotz's reputation on the line to say, if I'm just going to pull the plug after a year and a half or two, I think we believe he's not going to make a coaching change. He's pretty much said he's the guy until the end of the season. And there's probably an evaluation to be done on everything at that point. So to pull the plug, though, after 2 years, after handpicking this guy, it'd be one thing if the previous GM had hired Andrew Burnett. This is Barry Trotz's handpicked guy. I think all of that gives him probably a little more patience. The other part that's interesting is Barry Trotz, as a coach, didn't really coach the way Andrew Burnett coached,
Quite the opposite.
Quite the
actually.
opposite. Much more defense first mentality than Andrew Burnett, which is more of an offensive first. The best defense is a good offense, which both systems can be effective if you have the right personnel, if you have the right buy-in, and you execute it. So I think that is the big question going forward, is where can they meet in the middle? Where can Andrew Burnett maybe improve on some things that maybe he doesn't emphasize as much, right? That's one part of it. And also, how does Barry Trotz help him get a few more ingredients in his lineup that will bring out the best in the system that they want to play?
See, you said the key word was in all of this, and I know we'll talk about it more tomorrow, is, Barry Trotz. His reputation is on the line because you fire one coach because you don't believe that coach is the guy, and you have every right to. I get it. And you felt that you bringing in Andrew Burnett, it will be an upgrade. Well, John Hines and the Minnesota Wild are doing pretty good.
They are.
And if you have to fire your coach at the end of the season, it doesn't look bad on your resume. Not to say you can't overcome it, but it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look good on a short GM resume that you went away from a coach that was winning, and he did improve the team the second half of the season, but you just felt, hey, we got to go in another direction. You felt you needed to upgrade the roster, not just from a coaching standpoint, but from a player standpoint. You do that, and then after the second year, you fire him, and the coach that you fired 2 years ago is doing really well with the Minnesota Wild, who's in your division. That doesn't look good. And again, he can overcome it. I get it, but it just doesn't look good.
Austin on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, I'm starting to think he is not. I feel there should have been more improvement based on the players that were brought in. But also you could argue no, because of the secondary players aren't fitting in the system. But overall, it's gotten worse the past few years, and coaching is to blame. Tyler says, I think the better question is, can Barry Trotz and Brunette identify the tweaks necessary to make to the roster to allow Bruno to be the right coach? If they don't think that is possible, then no, he isn't the right coach. Clearly this year, he wasn't the right coach for this roster. And again, we're going to talk about Barry Trotz because Barry Trotz is culpable in this too. I know that we all love Barry Trotz, but when he made the moves that he made this summer, he put his stamp on this roster. And that process started last season when he traded Ryan Johansson, bought out Matt Duchene, brought in Ryan O'Reilly, among others, and then went out and spent a ton of money in free agency, brought in 3 of the top free agents on the market. We will talk about Barry Trotz tomorrow because he is a part of this as well. We are not absolving Barry Trotz here. But I still kind of go back to the question Derek asked last week, which I thought was a really good question. Tyler says, the better question is, can Barry Trotz and Andrew Burnett identify the tweaks necessary to make the roster to allow Bruno to be the right coach? Well, if you're Andrew Burnett, how much are you willing to sacrifice?
It sounded like he was willing to look at it a lot during these couple weeks. Let's also point this out, because I think this is a big part of coaching that is intangible. We can talk about the system and how you want to play, but the other part of it is in the fire, when you're in the trenches and your team is struggling, can you help create an environment of communication, pushing the right buttons to get you through that fire? All coaches have strengths and weaknesses. There are coaches that I would say this would be in all sports. Coaches that maybe aren't great in the X's and O's, but man, they will get you through the fire. They will push the right buttons. They've got the inspirational speech. They'll take a guy and sit him out if they need to sit him out. They'll bench a guy. There's positive reinforcement. There's those tools, right, that also are run hand in hand, side by side with your X's and O's. And then there's guys, well, I think Andrew Burnett, how I would describe him, he's much more of a cerebral, this is how I envision the hockey game being played. Here are the pieces I have. He's a system guy. He is not a rah-rah, inspirational speech kind of guy. Peter Laviolette is. Peter Laviolette probably is graded a little lower on his system, modernizing or things like that. Innovator, he's not really that. But he is a motivator. And when he's gotten into some fires that he hadn't got out of because he's coached a million different teams, right? But I think that this is the element that they're in right now. They're in the mud. My car is stuck. We got an axle that's out. We're not getting anywhere. Guys, we got to get moving. How do we get moving? I think they've struggled in that area today. I don't think that's all on the coach, but I do think that is a test of a hockey season, right? When you're in the mud and you got problems and everybody's running around going, what happened? Why are we here? How do you get out of that mud?
We will continue this conversation tomorrow, but coming up next, Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet NHL insider, will join us. We'll talk Four Nations face-off and more Predators coming up next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mace, Vinkin, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vinkin here with you, joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by Sportsnet NHL insider Elliot Freeman, presented by Old National Bank. Elliot, I know that you are at the Four Nations Face-Off tournament. The league could not have scripted a better game for the opener of this tournament. Canada defeating Sweden in overtime. It looked like Canada was going to run Sweden out of the rink in the first period, but the Swedes battled back. Exhilarating overtime. What was your top takeaway from last night's game, Canada and Sweden?
Crosby is still the best, man. Crosby is still the best. And watching him and McKinnon together here is going to do nothing to stop the people wanting to see those two play together, whether it's in Colorado or anywhere else. They're doing their interviews together. They were at the podium last night together. They were at practice this morning working on things together. If anybody thought this tournament was going to stop the Crosby and McKinnon need to play together talk, it's going to continue. Great night here, and you're right, Adam. They couldn't have scripted it any better.
I just want to take a moment to share with everybody how unfair the Canadians' first goal of the game was. It was a power play goal scored by Nathan McKinnon, assisted by Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid. I just want to point that out for everybody.
And it was as beautiful as you could imagine, those three putting
was.
something together like that.
So
it was that happened right below me. Our set is directly above that net, and you could see it coming, and you could feel like the fans here. Like, you know what, Adam? The funny thing is, we've been talking about the Canadian power play for the last 3 days and how lethal it should be. And they get one on the first shift of the game, and we're kind of laughing, like, watch, they'll come out here, it'll probably be a disaster because we've been hyping it up so much. And then it just unfolds. Like, you wouldn't even draw it up to look that good. And it was a really special night, and I'm in the rink right now. The USA and Finland have done their morning skates, and they're playing here tonight. And actually, matter of fact, they're just trying out the light show while I'm standing here, and it's red, white, and blue, so I know who this is for. And it's snowing here. We're getting some really bad snow. You always worry about, even in a great hockey city like Montreal, you always worry about, okay, it's not Canada. What's the crowd going to be like? I heard there's a lot of Americans who came up here, so I hope this is just as good a show tonight.
Speaking of the Americans, they kick off the tournament tonight against Finland at 7 o'clock Central at Bell Center. Elliot, there was a time where the idea that the United States could even match the level of talent that Canada had. There was a time where that was a completely far-fetched notion. But the Americans over time have crept up on Canada. I've read in many places that the Americans are considered the favorite in this tournament. When you think about the rise of USA hockey in general and how it's gotten to this point, you look at the talent on that team. What do you attribute that to?
I think that the game is in more places. Wayne Gretzky's trade from Edmonton to the Kings. How many teams exist because of that trade, Adam? You look at, and I'm 54. Like, I'm a big Michael Jordan guy. Like, as great as LeBron James is, I will always be a Michael Jordan guy because that was my guy. And we used to have debates like who was better, Gretzky or Jordan. There'd be other baseball players who you'd talk about here and there, but it was like whether it was Ken Griffey Jr. or whoever it was, but it always came down to Gretzky and Jordan. And the one argument the puckheads used to make is like half a league is there because of Gretzky. And so I think a lot of it was that his arrival. I think a lot of teams, like for example, the Dallas Stars, not only did they bring hockey to Texas, but they made sure they built a lot of rinks. Like I think that the toughest thing to get people to play hockey is just how expensive it is. Like, you look at these, like, I can't tell you now how many parents say to me, I can't believe my kid wants a $300 stick. And that to me is the biggest barrier to more people playing hockey is the cost of the sport, but there's no question the exposure to it has grown, and the ability for people to at least go to games or see it has grown. And I think the more you see it, the more you want to try something. And we've definitely had that.
We talk with Elliot Friedman, 32 Thoughts podcast. Now, Elliot, you being there now, and obviously UC will be a net, I believe.
Yes,
what is
playing tonight.
What is the perception of UC throughout the league now, based upon what you are hearing, and will can the Four Nations tournament change that perception if it's turned toward the worse?
You know what, Derek, I always believe, and you played the game, you understand that. And this is that you can always rewrite your narrative. No matter how badly your season is going, all it takes is one big game to change it. And particularly when the stakes raise. Like in the NFL, you can have a terrible regular season as an individual, but if the playoffs start and you have a big playoffs, everybody forgets how bad your regular season was. And I think, I don't think Saros, like at the beginning of the year, I thought Saros was really good, even though the Predators were struggling. And eventually he just kind of got dragged down. And it's like some of the talk around Team Finland here, Derek, is that this is going to be perfect for him because I think he, like one of the players was saying, like they can kind of tell he's like in shock by how bad Nashville's season has been. And it's really worn on him. Look, he got a big contract. He deserved it, but he wants to earn it. And, he wants to win. And I think that the one thing that this allows him to do, because, Nashville's not going to make the playoffs. We all know that. So what's he playing for? Well, suddenly he's been given something really important to play for. Derek, the Finns are the real underdogs of this tournament. They have been devastated by injuries, especially on the blue line. I was saying to a couple of the players that some of us feel kind of sorry for them because of the way their roster's been devastated. They're like, don't feel sorry for us. Like, that's ridiculous. But I think that, a good performance here from Saros could really go a long way to building himself back up. But, Derek, that's the sense I really got from a couple of players. Like, he's probably like a lot of players on the Predators. They're kind of in shock about, just how this year has gone. And it's really affected them.
It's a great point. Elliot, I was listening to your podcast and you had Michael Russo on there with you and Kyle talking about how UC Saros came across, that you could tell he had been a little bit beaten down by the lack of success. And, he knows what his numbers, that the surface numbers, and we've argued about this here, right? People can jump all over him and say, he's got a save percentage of under 900 and he's leading in the loss column and things like that. And if you look deeper, it's really as much of a reflection not only of he hasn't played great, but certainly the team around him has really struggled. But I'm sure as he carries those numbers onto this big stage, he's getting asked about it a lot, and you can tell it has weighed on him.
Yeah. Well, I think, he's a pro, and you guys don't need me to tell you, and the hockey fans in Nashville don't need me to tell you. You guys know how much that guy cares and how much pride he's got. He's a smaller goalie who's one of the league's best goalies at a position where there's prejudice against his size, but he's carved out his role. And that tells you how much he cares and how hard he competes. And I think this year has really been painful for him and a lot of the other Predators players. But that's what this really does. Again, him and the Finns are going in here as the real underdog. Like, there are guys. I'll tell you a story. So Yuri Lettinen, who's the great Dallas Star player, who's the GM of this team, I saw him at an event in November. And at that time, Toronto had a Finnish defenseman, Jani Hakanpää, who wasn't playing. And he said to me, do you think he's going to play? And I said, they're telling me he's going to play. And he said, we only have 8 Finnish defensemen in the NHL right now. So if we start losing guys, we don't have anyone left. And so they got 2 injuries. So Hakanpää couldn't play. Heiskanen, who's a big star in Dallas, he's out. And, like they're going to guys now who are like, they're going to have guys in the lineup tonight who aren't full-time NHL players. And so there's only one defenseman Finnish defenseman in the NHL who hasn't been on this roster at one point or another due to injuries. Like, that's how decimated they are. And like if Saros has any kind of game and any kind of performance, I think it's going to do wonders for him.
It is going to be a big spotlight for sure. And speaking of that, Elliot, I've always tell people when people ask me what's the best place to watch a game, I always say Montreal to me is the best. And I've never done a game in Montreal when Montreal has been a juggernaut. So I can't imagine what it's going to be like if, at some point when they cycle back, if I'm lucky enough to still be doing this, when they cycle back into a run where they're really good for a number of years. But even when they've been kind of a okay team, the atmosphere is so great in there. That was just,
it was great here last night.
Yeah. What a great thing for the league to be able to say, this is what we envisioned. What did we think we were going to see? But it hit every note that you would want to hit. And then you had this 3-on-3, which was just absolutely out of the park.
Yeah, it was. And that's going to be a conversation here, guys. That's that. So they had 10. So the overtime here is 10-minute 3-on-3 followed by the shootout. And they're testing the goal siren here. It was 10-minute 3-on-3 followed by the shootout, and Marner scored the winner at 6:06. So we went past 5 minutes, which is what we normally deal with in the NHL season. And every player was getting asked about that last night and today. How would you feel about 10-minute 3-on-3? But McKinnon was like, no, I was exhausted. And Laine was like, no, 5 minutes enough. Patrick Laine. But some other guys were like, yeah, I kind of liked it. And, that's one thing. The GM meetings are in March, the general managers. And, I was told this morning that because of what happened last night, and we'll see what happens for the rest of the tournament, this is going to be a conversation again. And maybe it's not 10, maybe it's 7, or maybe it's 8. But because of what happened in last night's game, we're gonna get a conversation about 3-on-3 overtime and making it longer. They'll tell you this. So Saturday night is Canada USA from here, and everybody is looking forward to that. So far, the NHL has kept it a secret as who's singing the national anthem here on Saturday night. So they're obviously very excited about whatever they're planning. We'll see. They haven't told us yet.
Elliot, I thought another thing that stood out last night, you've got these two teams full of great players. But even with that, like D-Mace was texting me last night going, my God, McKinnon and, McDavid, when they get going, they still can rise to a level where they're still standing out way above in terms of just pure talent. If you hadn't ever watched a hockey game before, you would still notice those two guys and say, my goodness, who are these two guys? Right? That was what was really stood out last night.
I agree. I agree with that. I thought McKinnon was phenomenal. I thought Crosby was incredible. I thought McDavid, even though every time he touched the puck, I thought he was in danger of doing something. I thought it was like, I'm one of those people who kind of pick the U.S. at the beginning of the tournament because I think top to bottom they're the best team. But Canada's elite talent, those guys are unreal, man. They are just a reminder of when you do this job, you get to see people who are so good at what they do. And I'll tell you something else. And I think, Derek, you would really appreciate this as much as anyone else. So McDavid and McKinnon, they went to the podium together after the game last night. They were done after midnight. And so today at the main rink, which is right downtown, only USA and Finland skated here because they're playing tonight. So Canada and Sweden, if they wanted to practice at all, they had to go to the Canadians' practice rink, which is about a 30-minute bus ride over a bridge. And there's a snowstorm here. And it was made into an optional, which means you don't have to take it. but two of the guys who were on the ice, one of the few players, were Crosby and McKinnon, and working on something they didn't like that happened last night during the game. Like, they were right on the ice, two of the only players to skate, two of the best players just working on something. And it tells you that not only is greatness talent, but greatness is embracing the grind. And I wasn't there this morning, but I saw the video and I was like, that's embracing the grind. That's why those two guys are great. Like, basically hours after they finished, they had every excuse not to practice. They had to hop onto a bus in a snowstorm and go out there, and they went out there. And I just think that's incredible. I really do.
Elliot, one more before we let you go. There are some notable trade targets playing in this tournament. Around here, we're focused on Gus Nyquist, but there are others. I think of Brock Nelson, Rickard Rakell. Of those players who could be moved at the deadline, which player could best help his cause, or I guess help his team's cause, in terms of increasing his value ahead of the deadline?
Well, that's a great question. I think I'll say this. Rantanen is playing tonight for Finland, and, he's a great player. I think we're all kind of wondering how Carolina is going to approach it here. I think a lot of eyes are going to be on him. He was in shock after that deal, and he hasn't started great yet in Carolina. He missed their last game. I think everybody's going to be watching him tonight to see what he kind of does. I think Rakell is a great pick, Adam. Obviously he's still got some. He's still got some time here to figure. He's still got some control over it. He can't be sent anywhere without his permission. But I thought he was really good last night, and to me, that really stands out as a tremendous pick. I would also say, I'll go with I'll go with Rantanen tonight. I think that's a really interesting one that's going to develop over the next couple of weeks. And if he has a big tournament here, I think a lot of people would be interested, but that's going to drive up the price if Carolina has to flip him.
Elliot Friedman, Sportsnet NHL Insider, presented by Old National Bank. Elliot, great stuff. Enjoy the action tonight and the remainder of the tournament.
All right, go Saros. See you guys later.
Elliot Friedman joining us on the program. 615-737-1025. We'll react to Elliot. Take your thoughts as well. 615-737-1025. Willie Dunick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3. The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. A programming note before we get to, it says Rob in Antioch. We will, before we get there, programming note, Jared is sick. So it's going to be a team effort here. Chase McCabe and Teron Davenport will host live from 2 to 3. The George Plaster Show on from 3 to 5.
Hold on one second.
That's going to be fun.
And then the Duel at Daytona coverage starting at 5 right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. We're a family. One man goes down, the rest of us step up.
We pick
Rob
up
is
the
in
slack.
Antioch on our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, guys. What do you think the Predators should do moving forward, not only between now and the trade deadline, but basically now and the offseason? And what do you think they should do during the offseason? I'm curious. Not what do you think they will do, but what do you think they should do?
Thanks for the call. Okay, that's an interesting question. So let's look toward the closest thing that's on the calendar, the NHL trade deadline, which is what, three-ish weeks away, thereabouts. I mentioned Gus Nyquist in the previous segment with Elliott as a trade target. If I'm Gus Nyquist, I have a getaway bag packed in my closet, because if it's up to me, there should be no chance that Gus Nyquist is a member of this team after the deadline. Now, what are you going to get for Gus Nyquist? I would guess probably a mid-round draft pick. You're not going to get a lot.
It's an interesting one because I think the thing that Nyquist brings to the table is, A, he's been through it before.
He's been traded twice, I believe, at the trade deadline in his career.
He's been an effective pickup. And the thing that makes him, I think, attractive is that he can play so many different roles for a team. He has been able to mesh because he can play left wing, he can play right wing. He can play on your second line. He can play on your third or fourth line. He can penalty kill. He can be a power play guy. He's got little tools, and when he's converting, he's an effective scorer. That's the problem. That's why his stock is down this year, is he just hasn't been able to convert, and it's put him on the list of almost every Predator, but he maybe more so than anybody else has had the most drastic drop-off in production. But that being said, I think another team could say, here's a guy that we're not going to have to spend 3 weeks teaching him our system. He will be able to mesh in quickly. He's a Swiss Army knife kind of guy. So when we say mid-round pick, I don't think it'll be like a 5th-round pick. I think it could be a decent, maybe as high as a 3rd, maybe even a 2nd. I don't know, or maybe a conditional kind of thing.
I would try to trade as many players as I could. Like, if you're expecting the Predators to have a sell-off like they did a couple of years ago when they traded Matthias Ekholm and Nino Niederreiter and Tanner Jeannot and Mikhail Granlund, that's not going to happen this time around. So it's not going to be an exciting deadline from the Predators' perspective. I would try to move Michael McCarron. He's under contract through next season, makes $900,000. I've seen his name on some trade boards. I'd move off of him. If you could find somebody.
But who plays his role on this team
at this point
for $900,000?
At this point,
that to me, on the surface, you would say, "Oh yeah, just trade him." He fights.
Mm-hmm.
He wins faceoffs. He can go up and not be overmatched by tough players. He's a little more undervalued than you might think, which is why I think a lot of teams who are trying to go on playoff runs think he's attractive. I'm curious what the market is, but because he's under contract at next year for such a cheap number, as opposed to Nyquist, who's a free agent, I wonder how they would weigh that, because you're going to have to replace. You need somebody who can fight, but you've got to have somebody who stands up for your skilled players. He does that. I understand the analytics people are like, you don't need that. You do need that. I promise you need that. So that's an interesting one to me. I don't know that it's a no-brainer. I think they will get interest in him. But so keep going.
The other player I would try to move, although he's injured right now, is Jeremy Lauzon.
Jeremy Lauzon, I don't know how close he is to helping somebody right now.
But he's under contract through next season, so maybe it's
at a good price,
$2 million. But the other thing I would think about.
But if I'm trading for him, I need him for the playoffs this year. I don't know that we know.
That's fair.
If he is going to be effective between now and the playoffs. He hasn't played for a long time. They haven't said much about him, but that tells you he's a long way from getting on the ice. If I don't, so his value is probably down unless you kind of know what his situation is.
Mm-hmm.
So I would not chalk that up as a for sure trade.
Just an option I would throw out there.
But if you're going to pay, if you don't just toss him aside for nothing when he is under a good price.
You're not giving him away.
Exactly. Now, somebody, this is all, you're listening to all offers. If you get something you can't refuse, but I just don't think you're going to get value back for him right now with his injury situation.
The other thing I would look to do, and this may be more of an off-season thing, Willie, but although the caller did ask about the off-season, is if there's an opportunity to buy with an eye toward next season, I would do that as well. If a young player becomes available and the Predators can use some of their draft capital, they have 3 first-round picks in the upcoming draft. If there's a younger player that they could bring in who could be an impact player, hopefully, not for this season, but for future seasons, if that presents itself, I would be entertaining that as well. Now, which player could that be? Like we've heard a lot about Dylan Cousins, right? Dylan Cousins, the young Buffalo Sabres center. His name is out there. If Barry Trotz thinks that Dylan Cousins, who's in his early 20s, who signed for several more years, I believe at around $7 million per season.
He's an interesting one. It's a big commitment.
Right. But if Barry Trotz thinks he's the answer at center and you have the opportunity to bring him in now or someone like that, I would consider that as well. I don't know how likely that is, but that's something I would also.
You hear his name a lot. I think in the coming weeks, that's a guy you're going to hear a lot. And so I think that makes sense if you think he's good. Because they're in the East, and the Predators have just recently played the Sabres twice. He hasn't been eye-popping for me. He did score a goal in the game the other night against Nashville. He's had one really productive season, and he's still very young. So you know he can do it. He hasn't played on a winning team. What are you trying to get? What do you have to give up to get him? That's a great question. He's a really intriguing one for me. The other guy that you haven't mentioned, I think I'm wondering what kind of market they might have is Colton Sissons, who has played in a ton of playoff games, big playoff games, shined in playoff games. When used the right way, he helps you win in a lot of ways that people aren't going to be wowed with if you're not into the analytics or the nuances of the game. He can win a big face-off for you. He can penalty kill. He helps you win even if he's not scoring a lot of goals. And for a team that needs depth, he's an intriguing guy. So these are all names to watch. And all that being said, how much cap space are you going to have to really try to make some moves in the offseason? To get to the caller's question, it's a really good question. Can I find a better to me, it's more on defense that these questions have. And the ever-present question of the center, right? You're always – but the centers just don't become available in the offseason very often. That's why Cousins, as underwhelming as he has been, but the upside that he's got is a rare case. But on D, they've got to figure out who can I put with Brady Shea to bring out the best in Brady Shea. He has been a major disappointment. I think he would tell you he's majorly disappointed with how this season has gone. He is a guy that owns up to it. He knows it. He's a good guy. He's a good player that is lost right now. Who is the right guy to put with Roman Josi to bring him back to Norris Trophy level? Those are essential questions, I think, for Barry Trotz. You can figure out the third pair. Third pair you can figure out. Who to put with Josi, who to put with Shea, assuming that those guys as a pair aren't going to happen. Big, big questions for the offseason.
Andy is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Andy, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. I appreciate y'all's hockey talk. I've got a question. I know it sounds crazy, and you can call me crazy, but I've often wondered with Josie's skills, if he was moved to the forward side, would it prolong his career as an offense, as an offensive generator, whether it's center or wing, if we have enough defensive players, in our minor leagues to bring up? But that's my question. What about Josie on offense? Would it prolong his career, and would it help the Predators?
Thanks for the
Thank
call,
you.
Andy. You're
Yep.
not crazy. There are no crazy questions on this program. Now, I don't know if it would prolong his career. He's a pretty elusive skater. I mean, he does have the puck a lot, so therefore he's prone to being hit more. But Yossi, the most recent example of a player who has shifted between positions is Brent Burns. Brent Burns, I believe, began his career, Willie, as a forward. And when he was traded from Minnesota, from Minnesota to San Jose?
I think so.
He was actually.
I don't really remember exactly.
It was
when
a long
happened.
time
Yeah,
ago.
it was a long time ago.
He was a forward. He shifted between the two. Now he's a defenseman. He's been a defenseman for several years. Now Roman Josi is certainly a talented player. You just don't see a lot of that. We were talking about dual position players with Travis Hunter. You don't see a lot of that shifting in hockey.
You don't, and so I think that the answer is really no. It's a really interesting question because you're thinking of how do I get the most out of Roman Josi, who's still under contract for 3 more years after this year, and he has had a down year. I'm really curious if this 2-week break will help him refresh and get healthier. I don't feel like he's been healthy. He has not been zooming around the ice, and I hope and I believe. I can't say I know for sure, but I believe that some physical things have slowed him down much more than just simply he's a year older. And the Predators have to hope that that's the case in the long term. But his unique skill set, his ability to cover all of the ice that he covers when he's at his best, that's cut out for being a defenseman. It's really not. He doesn't have a forward skill set to me. So I think that it's much more of let's get Roman Josi back to number one, having a partner that brings out the best in him and getting him 100% healthy to do his thing.
615-737-1025. Willie, you are a seasoned broadcaster. With all of the games you've called, I'm sure you've made a flub. But we're going to take a moment to talk about one major flub we heard on a recent SEC broadcast. We'll do that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
All right, let's talk about F&M Bank. Banking made easy on purpose. What a great, simple goal to have. And F&M Bank executes that goal every day in all of the communities they're in. They've got 20 locations in our listening area. They like to be right in the heart of your community. And they've got locations in places like Springfield and Mount Juliet and Murfreesboro, which, of course, is getting bigger every year. But go to their website, myfmbank.com, and find the nearest website or nearest location to you. You'll find that there's one nearby. And then take advantage of all of the great things that they offer, like the Smart Swipe card I was telling you about yesterday. They've got great opportunities for financial freedom and simplifying your process. So they're going to guide you every step of the way with their experts. They want you to come in and talk to them and build a relationship. Get in touch with F&M Bank's friendly team today and discover how they can empower your financial goals. myfmbank.com is the place to go. And by the way, we will take it to the bank tomorrow, right around this time, every Friday at 1:45. myfmbank.com. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Coach, everybody talks about the SEC being the best conference in college basketball, but the conference is just 500 since conference play started. What do you make of that?
I think it's been a really disappointing start to conference play. I feel like we should, I feel like we're not living up to the expectations, just being at 500 as a conference. And I just, I'm kind of looking around at the other programs in the league, but like, guys, we got to pick this up. This is embarrassing. And so we'll find a way. I believe in this league. I think we definitely have an upside, and we're going to work really hard to get there.
That was Kentucky men's basketball coach Mark Pope discussing the SEC's collective 500 record in conference play. And you might be asking yourself, why are we talking about this? Of course the SEC is 500 in conference play because all of the teams have to play each other. Willie, why don't you tell us exactly why we're discussing this?
Well, it's actually really funny now. I would equate it a little bit to if you fell for a prank somewhere along the course of your life, maybe not on national TV, but you fell for a prank of a brain teaser where you say, there's one where like, hey, this plane crashed, and there were a certain amount of people on the Canadian side of the border, and there was a certain amount of people. They throw you off, and they say, where would you bury the survivors? And we're like, oh, well, maybe it's in Canada because it's over here, and you said it was over here, but you don't bury survivors, right? So you overlook the obvious. And there's a bunch of brain teasers like that. We could go through them, right? So this happened to Carl Ravitch the other night. Alabama was waxing their opponent, right? Which they do most nights.
It was Texas, I believe.
Yeah, they just whipped them. And they're way ahead. So they're looking for little things. And so there was a guy that sarcastically put out a tweet. I forget. It's just some guy who's a big Alabama fan. And it was on the Twitter feed. And he was jokingly saying, oh, here's ESPN hyping all the SEC teams. Did you know that they're 500 in league play since January 4th? And here they are still hyping them up, biased to the SEC, ESPN. And he was just being funny. But somewhere, I don't know if it was Carl Ravitch himself or some statistician or producer that thought that there was just an actual stat that was relevant. But Carl Ravitch, for whatever reason, decides to put it in play.
So think about it. We know how dominant they were in the non-conference season, the SEC. They were 185-23. Since January 4 into Tuesday, the SEC teams are 82-82. It's not as if one team or two teams or three. They're 82-82. There's been no ability to pull away. There's no dominant group of teams.
He just made it worse. The more and more he started to
he's trying to explain why that's a big thing. Wow, they have really leveled off. But by definition, every conference is exactly 500 in conference play. This is so funny. People saw this, and of course the smart aleck that tweeted this goes, I got him. I got Ravitch and Dykes. They fell for it, And so they're trying to act like this is some sort of analysis that is really next level. And so you have people just being really jumping on
They're
this.
Trolling him.
They're trolling him.
Yeah.
They're trolling him. So he got buried on Twitter. College basketball report. Every basketball conference's record in conference play. Atlantic 10, 83-83. ACC, 116-116. Big 10, 120-120. And it goes through every conference, all 30 conferences or whatever. So, I mean, obviously, every conference is exactly 500 in conference play, so that is not a relevant stat. But this is where Ravitch probably made a mistake. Instead of just saying, oh, I'm such an idiot, I messed up. And you laugh at it along with everybody else. But he first came out and said, it was tongue in cheek. I was just kidding. Obviously, this or this, you didn't. And everybody's like, nah, that sounded pretty sincere. We can play it again if you want. And then he did have to come to grips
Yeah.
with it today. And I'm glad he did. He said, look, I got to take the L on this one.
Take it, man, like the youngest
Because
say.
he got absolutely and I think he got buried twice as bad because he tried to act like it wasn't
a big
a screw up.
Yeah.
And that's what, to me, I've tried to learn my lesson, and it will probably happen to me someday. I'm trying to avoid being on awful announcing for something really bad, and so far so good, knock on wood. But we all make screw ups, right? And when you mess up, you have to own it. You have
Especially
to
if you
own it.
talk so
It's
much.
live TV. You're gonna screw up. On the radio, we've said a lot of things that are dumb, right? You have to own up to it, because if you talk long enough, you will get trapped. So you can't let your ego and your quest for perfection get in the way.
What made it even worse, I think he understood. I think he realized as he was talking, this ain't right.
Yeah.
But
He's like, I'm committed to it.
He said, I'm committed to it
keep
now.
going.
And he was like,
Hopefully
I'm
nobody
going.
notices.
Because
Yeah.
there was a part where I'm listening to him. I'm like, yeah, he's just going with this now because he's like, I'm in it.
Nobody's been able
Yeah.
to separate. Well, wait a minute.
Well, hold on.
Alabama is 9-1. Auburn is 9-1. Like, wait a minute.
I think he realized, but he just tried to go with it.
Oh, man. Steven
tried
is
to
on
make
our
it
phone
right.
line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Steven, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Adam,
Yes.
you got to put Willie in his place. If
Why do I
we
need to do
had
that?
O'Reilly, Yossi, Forsberg, Marchessault, Steven freaking Stamkos, and O'Shea, and don't even get me started on the goalie. Haven't started his contract yet. For 8 years, they're terrible. If this was any other coach, he would be fired in the NHL. Period. Fired. Done. I know Willie gets a check from the Predators, so we'll give him a pass. But you guys have got to get on to him about this.
I will.
It's ridiculous.
I thank you for the call, Steven. I will say, as it relates to getting, if you want to talk about getting on Burnett, I spent an hour on this program after 25 games saying why I would fire the coach. So I was there early in the season. We're going to talk more about the state of the Predators tomorrow. If Brunette is not fired this offseason, I think he's going to enter next season with an incredibly short leash. I don't think he would get the same leeway next season if they have the same start as they had this season.
I would think that that's fair at this point. I do think there are teams that just have a bad year, but like I said, the best coaches find a way to get out of the mud, and it's too late to save this season. And what they're going to try to do, I think, is try to reap the benefits. If they don't move up and they end up with a lottery pick and they get a little lucky in the lottery and they pick 4th or 3rd or 5th or 6th, that's an opportunity that this franchise usually doesn't have because they've been a pretty consistent winning team. I get the caller's point, and it's easy. If you want to listen to Jared and think everything's so simple, you just fire the coach, then fine. But I don't look at the game that way, never have. I'm around it every day. I don't think it's that simple. And I do think it's wise sometimes to give it a little more time than just have a knee-jerk reaction of they stink, therefore fire the coach.
I'm hoping, by the way, in a non sequitur, that the two grumpy old men who were on this station from 6 to 9 a.m., Joe Rexrode and Paul Kaharski, take time to watch USA and Finland. They both dislike the idea of this tournament.
I love this
Nick
tournament,
Keyser
man.
tried his darndest to convince them otherwise. I think their argument was, why pause the season for 2 weeks to have this tournament? It's an incomplete tournament because there are only 4 nations in it. By the way, this tournament will continue every other year, and the expectation is that more nations will be involved. I believe that is the case. But Derek loves the Predators. Derek, I would say otherwise, he's a casual hockey fan.
Yeah.
You should have seen him texting us last night. He was into it last night. This is great for casual fans. It's slow time in the sports calendar. Football is over. You're watching the best players in the world, most of them, because some of them are from countries that aren't playing in this tournament. Most of the best players in the world are giving their all for their country. I'm fascinated to see what the ratings are, but casual fans, I think should jump all
Listen,
over this.
If you got a chance to watch McDavid or McKinney, you do it. Even if you just know the names and don't watch hockey, watch the Four Nations playoff.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you want to see some of the best players all on one ice playing competitively, not an all-star game, but competitively, you want to watch this because it may just turn you into a hockey fan.
I do think they should be careful not to do it too often.
Yeah.
Because they're going to the Olympics next year. Too much of it, I do think it's old, but it hasn't been done in 10 years.
But I think hockey needs it.
Yes, and that's why these players want it. It is high-level intensity. This is not the Pro Bowl. This is not an all-star game. These are teams playing for real. The theater tonight, from a Predators perspective, a loaded USA team that's got the most firepower they've ever had against a big underdog Finland whose best defenseman is injured and two of the next best defensemen are also out. UC Saros facing that firepower. That is going to be worth watching tonight. I guarantee you. That's on ESPN tonight at 7.
At 7 o'clock. But coming up next, Chase and Teron Davenport will have you for an hour, followed by the George Plaster Show from 3 to 5 and NASCAR coverage starting at 5 right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Be love on your people. Have a safe, wonderful, and blessed Thursday. Peace.